Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Mr. J, and today we're going to be doing some Diablo 4. This build does a ton of damage and it does actually utilize your minions, because for me, I want to play Necromancer. If I don't have my minions, I just feel like I'm an emo wizard. So this build does utilize the minions, unlike a lot of the other Necromancer builds on YouTube right now where they just sacrifice their minions and they just use Bone Spear, things like that, or Corpse Explosion. This build right now, I'm only level 53, so that's not truly done yet. I'm still needing some of my legendary gear. I'm still needing to get into the endgame, so I will do a second part to this once I, like an updated part to it once I actually get my gear in order, once I get more Paragon levels and things like that. So if you do want to see an updated version of the build, leave a like on it, subscribe if you guys are new, comment down below, let me know if you guys have interest in seeing that updated like endgame version of this. But as of right now, this build is perfect for leveling up, it's perfect for going into world tier 2 and 3, it's perfect for that like transition point between sort of the world tiers and things like that. This build hits really hard for the level that it's actually at, and I don't even have the right aspects on here. And right now I have a bug in my game that doesn't let me put an aspect on my two-hander, so I don't know what that's all about. But if I did actually have the right aspects on here, we'd be doing a ton more damage as well. So I am calling this build my Grim Legion build. The whole point of this build was to have a big old army of dead enemies, dead creatures, you know, my golem. I wanted to actually utilize the minions that the Necromancer is known for. And because our main abilities are Reap and Sever, which are both very powerful scythe attacks, we do feel like the Grim Reaper a bit, so it fits. Grim Legion, I like it. This build is super freaking awesome, so I hope you guys enjoy it. If you guys do, leave a like on the video as well, and let's go ahead and get into it. So starting off with the main ability here, we actually have Reap, which again, the main abilities here don't really do much damage. You only really use them to get essence back, so it's not going to hit super hard, but if an enemy gets hit with Reap and then dies within 2 seconds, you do gain 30% attack speed for 3 seconds, which is amazing because all of your minions actually inherit your attack speed, critical damage, and I think it's the more skill damage you have, they inherit a lot from you. So that 30% attack speed boost that you get from hitting with Reap is worth it. And then of course the first enemy that you hit with Reap actually forms a corpse, so that's pretty good too. So for the core skills, we're using Sever. Sever sends out a specter of you, a skeleton version of you with a giant scythe, forward and attacks with it, dealing about 1800 to 2300 damage at our current level. And then once it does that big initial swing, it actually returns back to you, dealing about 600 to 700 more damage on top of that. And the first modifier that we have is that Sever damages enemies along its path for 25% of the initial damage. So as it's sliding through a crowd, they're being damaged for 25% of that initial like 2000-ish damage. And then they'll do, again, the return damage on top of that. So you have the initial damage, the travel damage, and the return damage. And then every fourth cast of it, you actually can make them vulnerable for 2 seconds, which is great because we just stack so much vulnerable in this build. It's amazing. So then you want to get Hewed Flesh. 3 points into this allows you to have a 12% chance to create a corpse at the target location every time you damage something. So big groups and big enemies that just take a lot of hits will actually spawn you a lot of corpses. And speaking of big bosses like that, you actually get a doubled chance against bosses. So it goes from a 12% chance to a 24% chance against bosses. So in a boss arena, if you have 3 points into Hewed Flesh here, you can actually get probably 3 or 4 corpses within one whole pool of essence that you're going to use. So you basically have a damage rotation. You're going to want to do a bunch of damage with your essence. You're going to take all of those corpses that you spawn. You're going to want to pop them for Corpse Explosion, which isn't our main damage, by the way. Actually, Sever is our main damage here, but our Corpse Explosion does do a good bit of damage, but I'll get to that in a second. So then we go up here, we put 1 point into Unliving Energy, just so that way we can actually get access to Imperfectly Balanced. But it's not bad either, because we get a +3 essence. 3! Yay! That's like 1/6 the cost of a Sever. But using Imperfectly Balanced like we are gives you 15% extra damage with your core skills and only takes up 9% more essence, but because we actually can regen so much essence with this build, that's not actually a bad thing. So we get more damage than it costs. It's fantastic. So now we're going to focus on the corpse skills over here. So what we're actually using is Corpse Explosion and Blood Mist. We only have 1 point into Blood Mist, but this one is amazing because of the armor that we have. It's fantastic. So Blood Mist is a very underutilized skill, I've noticed, and I don't know why, because it's fantastic. So basically what it will do is whenever you activate Blood Mist, it will turn you immune for 3 seconds. Your movement speed will be reduced by just a little bit, and you will periodically damage and like tick the enemies for like 30 or 40 damage. And in a group, you are damaging and ticking them for so much damage over time that you can actually spawn corpses from this damage too, and you heal yourself for about 0.5% of your maximum life. So about 7 max life for me right now. So we're just using this as like our oh crap button. If we got to get out of danger, we just pop this and we can actually be immune. And immunity is fantastic because you can see down there, it says immune characters cannot be damaged and all control impairing effects are removed and prevented. So if you are stunned, if you are crowd controlled with spider webs, if you are about to get one hit, you just pop Blood Mist and you just walk around and pop all the corpse explosions around you. So now for Corpse Explosion, speaking of that, we're using it in a bit of a non-conventional method. So we're not using it for a main damage source, but it's like our plan B damage, well maybe even plan C damage source, because like we have Sever, we have our minions, and we have Corpse Explosion. So we have 3 really big damages that can all stack up. So what we have is we have Corpse Explosion at 4 out of 5 because I wanted to put a point elsewhere. So we have a good chunk of damage with Corpse Explosion, but you can put the full 5 in there if you want to. And then we are actually increasing our Corpse Explosion radius by 15%, which is fantastic. And the final point here, it says Corpse Explosion becomes a darkness skill, and instead of exploding, releases a vile miasma, dealing 2600 shadow damage over 6 seconds. So over here, you add that miasma damage on top of the initial explosion damage, I believe, and now you do 3400 damage over 6 seconds. It is crazy, and with that extra radius, you are doing it in such a big giant pool. It's insane. And yes, every time you pop a corpse, this damage does stack. So you're seeing basically like, I've seen like 600 to 900 damage a tick with this. So it's a good chunk of damage on top of our Sever and on top of our minions. And the final point here that we're going to talk about is Grim Harvest. This one did get a nerf, but it's still useful. So every time you pop a corpse, whether it be with your summoning skills or whether it be with Corpse Explosion, you get 6 essence back. It's fantastic. It's great for getting essence. And because of our armor, Blood Mist can actually pop Corpse Explosion. I'll talk about that in a second, but yes. So we actually can regen our essence by using Blood Mist too. So it's just great. I'll go into more into detail with the armor section, but that's what we have going on. So for the cursed section, we aren't actually using any of these, but we are putting 3 points into Death's Embrace because I like to be close up. You tend to be close up because your main skill, Reap, is very close range, but you totally could put these 3 points into Death's Reach. If you find yourself being more distant, just swap these 3 points into Death's Reach instead. But I put them here because I like to take less damage and do more damage. This one's just fantastic. It's great. And now the next section, which is the corpse skills here. So we have the corpse tendrils, we have bone spirit, and we have all these other passives and stuff like that. We aren't using any of those. We are only using the shadow passives. So we have 1 point put into Reaper's Pursuit. So damaging enemies with darkness skills increases your movement speed by 5% for 3 seconds. This one's not great. We're not really banking on this one a lot. We're only using it to get to these other ones back here, like Crippling Darkness, which says that darkness skills have a 15% chance to stun for 3 seconds, which is fantastic. I'll get to that later. But essentially, we do actually have the ability to get extra damage for stuns and stuff, so I'll get to that in a second. But then we have Gloom, which says when you damage enemies with darkness skills, they take 6% increased damage from you and your minions for 2 seconds, stack up to 3 times. So that 6% becomes 12% and then becomes 18% extra damage from you and your minions. So your darkness skills and darkness damage, your shadow damage in general, just becomes so much more powerful whenever you and your minions start damaging things with that. And because our Corpse Explosion, because our Reap and our Sever are 3 damages, and even some of our minions do shadow damage, we're stacking this up like crazy. And so finally we have Terror, which says darkness skills deal 9% bonus damage to enemies who are slowed, and 9% bonus damage to enemies who are stunned or immobilized. And these bonuses do actually stack and apply to shadow damage dealt by your minions. So if you are doing slow damage, if you are stunning them, if you are doing both of those at the same time, you will actually get an 18% damage increase. And they also count for your minion damage too, so when your minions do shadow damage, that helps out even more. And so because the golem can actually stun, and because a lot of our skills can also inflict slow, we have both of these stacking basically all the time. So these are all great to have. And moving on to the final one over here, which is the ultimate section. We are using Bloodwave for a specific reason because of our armor, but if you want to take these points out and use it for Army of the Dead, I'll show you something else that you could use that would be great to use for Army of the Dead if you want to use that one instead. So my current ultimate is Bloodwave. Bloodwave does also slow enemies by 50% for 4 seconds, which is great for a couple of reasons because of our armor, but also because it just does a crap ton of damage. So next we're going to talk about these minion passives over here. We have 3 points in Golem Mastery, so our Golem's life and damage is increased by 75%. This one is too good to ignore. Even though we don't have the other ones for the mages and the warriors, we actually need the Golem one. The Golem's slam and the Golem's regular hit can be like 2,000 damage, so it's kind of crazy, if not more. I think I've seen him hit for like 5,000 damage before, so the Golem is just too good to pass up. So then we have Inspiring Leader, so that way after you are healthy for 4 seconds, you and your minions gain 4% attack speed, which is pretty good, especially like I said, because your minions inherit attack speed from you as well, so that's kind of a boost to them twice. And then we have Bonded in Essence, so every 5 seconds, your Skeletal Priest's healing will heal your skeletons for an additional 60% of their maximum life. What this basically means is that if your skeletons are about to die, you basically just pop 1 corpse. You just use one of your little summon things for your Skeletal Priest, and it will heal them for the majority of their life pool. It keeps them alive a ton. So the next passive we're going to talk about is Death's Defense. It basically says that if your minions get hit really, really hard by 1 attack, you don't lose more than 70% of their life. It saves them from getting 1 shot. It's fantastic. And then we have Hellbent Commander, which basically says that you deal 30% increased damage with your minions when you're close to them. So if you find yourself kind of farther back from your minions and you don't really sit next to them, or like they kind of go off on their own, then take the 3 points out of here and put them somewhere else on the build. You don't really need to do that. You can put them somewhere else. And the final point here in the key passives is for Callan's Edict. So after we have not taken damage in the last 3 seconds, our minions gain 15% attack speed. And because we have more than 7 minions, that 15% is actually buffed up to 30%. It's doubled whenever you have more than 7 minions. So we have crazy stun damage, crazy vulnerable damage, slow damage. We have tons of darkness damage. The skill tree is all about stacking your minions with the shadow damage and just kind of getting your mana and resources back so you can keep using your Sever. This one is great. This one's really fun, and it's the first time I've really felt like powerful as the Necromancer. This one is great for damage. I have other builds that I'm working on, which, by the way, subscribe for more builds that I'm actually working on. And for the Paragon board, I haven't had much experience with putting points into the Paragon board just yet. I don't have a bunch of glyphs or anything, but this is what it looks like if you guys are curious. I have just gone for any sort of intelligence boost here, so we have a bunch down here. We have some damage boosts. We did actually get enough willpower to get to the Prime node here, so we are getting the 20% damage and 4% maximum life. Then we've gone for maximum life, again, more damage, more intelligence, more willpower, things like that. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to go this direction so we get all of these intelligence nodes and all that stuff. And so like I said, once I get to more endgame stuff, once I get to a bit of higher level, we'll have more Paragon boards here to show off. So if you guys want to keep an eye out for the endgame version of this, if you want me to make an endgame version of this, let me know with a comment down below. But yeah, that is the Paragon board. Nothing super crazy, nothing fancy, but that's what we did for you guys, so you guys can check that out there. This build just does so much damage, it is incredible. But now let's move on to the Book of the Dead. So we've got our Skeletal Warriors on the Reaper ones down here, so that way they actually do darkness damage. And the node that we're selecting here says Reaper's attacks against enemies who are immobilized, slowed, stunned, or vulnerable reduce the cooldown of their powerful wind-up attack by 2 seconds. And because our abilities, our skills, our minions, basically everything we have can actually immobilize, slow, stun, and vulnerable, we are getting this cooldown reduced by a lot. So instead of it being a 10-second cooldown for their big, heavy damage attack, it's only going to be 3 or 4 seconds. Next, we're going to go into the Skeleton Mages here. We actually have the Cold Mages. Instead of it being Shadow Mages, we're doing Cold, because the Cold Mages, whenever they damage enemies with their primary attack, we gain 2 Essence. So because we have the attack speed bonuses that we're actually getting from all of our skills and everything, and all of our items you can put on there, they are attacking so fast that you are just getting tons and tons and tons of essence back. That 2 essence adds up a lot here. It allows us to spam our Sever a ton more. So next we're going to go over the golems. In the golems we have the Iron Golem for a very specific reason. This node right here says Iron Golem Slam makes enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds. And it's in a giant range. And that's the slam that deals like 5,000 damage. So that slam is really, really good here because the range is huge. The damage is like 5,000 damage and you can hit vulnerable with it. So whatever's not dead by the time your main golem hit happens and the vulnerable happens, the vulnerable applies. So you're going to stack all of that shadow damage, the vulnerable damage, the slow damage, everything on top of that, and you're going to cleave through them. It's going to just do so much damage. Your Sever can hit for like 4,000 damage every time you go through something. It's kind of crazy. So now let's go for the character's armor and abilities that we have from our aspects. So like I said earlier, our aspects are not fully done. We have 3 pieces without aspects, and for right now, I don't know why it won't let me do it, but I do have 2 aspects that would be perfect for our sword here, but it won't let me put them on my sword. So I will show you the 2 that I've considered for this one, and you guys can look out for those for your build, but for some reason it won't let me put them on my sword. I don't know why. But before we get into all of the armor stuff, I want to go over the 2 main stats that you want to look out for on your armor for the primary stats like strength, intelligence, willpower, dexterity. Of these, you want to look at intelligence and willpower. Intelligence gives you extra skill damage. You can see I have a 43.9% extra skill damage increase from our intelligence, but you also gain resistance to all elements by a certain percentage, which mine is 22% right now. That's amazing. And then below that, you have willpower, which gives you a resource regeneration boost, which is only a few percent, but once you stack it up high enough, like the 200 I have here is already a 6.2% increase of my resource regeneration, so that'll give me my essence back even faster. And that stacks on top of our cold mages and the 2 essence regen that they give us from their primary attacks on top of the corpse explosion regen that we can have. So you end up actually getting a ton of your mana back, or your essence back, whatever it's called. So now speaking of the armor, our helmet has the legendary aspect saying that we heal for 31 life per second for each enemy that's close to us, up to 147 life per second, which is huge given the fact that we have 1,336 life. So every single second that we're near a bunch of enemies, we can get 147 of this life back. On top of that, we got 44 intelligence, which is an amazing roll, and we have a plus 13% to all stats. So that includes intelligence and that includes willpower. So we're actually getting like 57 intelligence and 13 to everything else, which is amazing. The only bad part about this helmet is the plus 2 ranks to decrepify. We don't use that, so don't look for that. Don't go for that skill on your helmet. That actually would be the one part of this that I would re-roll if I had the materials to do so. But now for the chest plate, this is where things get really fun too, is because we got an amazing roll here. We got 28 willpower, 23 intelligence, shadow damage rolled onto it, and then I imprinted the aspect saying, when hit while not healthy, a magical bubble is summoned around you for 3.5 seconds, and when you stand in that bubble, players, all of your team, including you, and all of your minions, I believe too, are immune and can only occur every 90 seconds. So like I mentioned earlier with the Blood Mist skill, immune is really, really good. So you just stand there in a giant pack, you can't be damaged, you can't be crowd controlled, you can't be affected by basically anything. This one is going to save you a ton in boss fights or big things like that whenever it's like a spider or anything with poison or whatever. Those pesky poison pools are not going to mess with you here. So for the gloves, I don't have an aspect for these ones, but I got 29 willpower, 25 intelligence, and I got plus 2 ranks to Sever, which is our main damage ability. That's the giant scythe that we send out, so that's great. For the pants, we got 22 intelligence, plus 11 to all stats, so it's actually 33 intelligence and plus 11 to all stats. And we got 6% healing received, so if I were to reroll anything, it'd be the healing received, which I might do that later, but the healing received is fine too because it keeps us alive. So for the boots here, we didn't get willpower, we got strength instead, which is a bad roll, but we did get 28 intelligence, which is pretty good. But things get really fun with these boots once you look at the legendary aspect. It says Blood Mist triggers corpse explosion on surrounding corpses, and when Blood Mist does detonate a corpse, the cooldown of Blood Mist is reduced by 0.4 seconds. So that 22-second cooldown that Blood Mist has is reduced by a couple of seconds whenever you just walk into a group of corpses. But on top of that, like I said earlier with Blood Mist, we go immune, we trigger a bunch of damage on them with a bunch of little ticks and everything, and those damage ticks can then spawn huge flesh corpses, which we can then trigger because we trigger Corpse Explosion. And then Corpse Explosion triggers those miasma pools on the ground, so in a boss fight with like 3, 4, 5, 6 corpses on the ground, you just coat the entire ground in the miasma pools, dealing shadow damage, which then in turn triggers the Gloom one here, because whenever we damage things with darkness skills, they take 6% increased shadow damage from me and our minions for 2 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. So you are constantly triggering Gloom by just activating Blood Mist and doing Corpse Explosion. But on top of that, all of our abilities are, all of our minions are, we are just never losing Gloom, basically ever. So this one's a really, really fun one. So the weapon, this is what I mentioned earlier, I can't put any legendary aspects on here for some reason. I've tried like 2 and none of them go on them, but the sword is so good. It's so fantastic. We got very lucky here. So essentially what we have is 1200 damage per second plus 32% critical strike damage, which is a multiplicative damage increase on top of like vulnerable and things like that. But we also got 120 intelligence and 52 to all stats, which again, the all stat adds on to our intelligence. We also have 26% damage to controlled enemies, and we have 31% extra vulnerable damage on top of the 2 gems in there that give me extra critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies, which is basically everything, everywhere, all the time. So this sword makes us hit ridiculously hard. And if you want to know what aspects to look out for something like this, I have 2 here. So this one is a low level aspect. That blue number could actually be higher, but it says distant enemies have an 8% chance to be stunned for 2 seconds when they hit you. But the coolest part of this one says you deal 22% increased damage to stunned enemies. And again, it can go up to 40%. I got a bad roll. So we have 22% increase right now, but if we put it onto our 2-handed weapon, it would go up to a 44% chance. Or if we had a better roll, like a 40% or something, it would be an 80% increase of damage to stunned enemies, which is basically everything all the time. The other good one that you can put on there is this one. This one says you deal 10% increased damage for each second that you stand still, up to 30%. So it's capped at 30. So if you stand still for 3 seconds, you basically have 30% damage, which is insane. But then if you put it onto a 2-handed weapon, it doubles the blue number up to 20%. So you stand still for 1 second and you would gain 20% additional damage. And then you stand still for 2 seconds and it goes up to 30%. So like you're just gaining a constant 20% damage all the time. So if I could put either of these on my weapon, both of these would be very, very good to use. Alright, so now for the amulet and the jewelry and everything, we have the amulet, which says your maximum number of skeletal mages is increased by 3. So this will help us maintain that 7 minion buff that we have from our key passive, but it will also help us with mana regen because of the cold mages giving us 2 essence back per basic attack. And we have the essence cost reduction, summoning skill damage, crowd control duration, and damage for 4 seconds after killing an elite. So really all of these are really good to have. On top of that, we have the ring that gives us basic skills gain 16% attack speed, which is pretty good, but you don't really use Reap that much, but it's nice to have it, I guess. And again, because our attack speed bonuses also apply to our minions over here, the attack speed bonus from this is actually pretty good too, because then they get the attack speed bonus as well. And we've got the critical strike damage, physical damage, lucky hit, and the fortify gen. So if I want to reroll one of these, it'd be the fortify on there, but that's not too bad. So for the secondary ring, this is actually why we're using Blood Wave, because we have an aspect that says Blood Wave fires 2 additional waves, each one dealing 58% less damage than the previous one. So you get 3 waves total, and they kind of stair-step down in damage. That's really good. That's really nice. But I will also show you these other 2 rings that we have here. So if you wanted to use Army of the Dead, you want to look out for this one. This one is amazing. As you can see, I actually got the perfect roll on it. So while Army of the Dead is active, your minions gain 100% extra attack speed and take 90% reduced damage. That is amazing. So if you want to wear any sort of aspect on a ring, this would be another good one to use. And you can also use this one. So you have an 8% increased dodge chance versus enemies that are affected by damage over time effects, which is basically everything with us. And whenever you dodge, you gain 7 of our primary resource. So It's a little bit of a resource gen, not a lot. 7's not a lot considering that you have like 100 or so at starting value, so like 7's not great, but if you have 2 dodges, you can get about 14 back or so. So if you want to look for those two, those are good options as well, but we are currently using Blood Wave right now. So that is all of our armor, that's all of our pieces of gear, that's our Book of the Dead, that's our abilities, that is how everything works. That will actually do it for this build. So that has been my Grim Legion build. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. If you do want to see an updated endgame version of this, let me know in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of this build in the comments down below as well. And I have 2 more builds to show you guys in future videos. So if you don't want to miss out on those, if you want more Necromancer builds that all include the minions, subscribe as well. But that will go ahead and do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this helped you guys. If it did, let me know with a like on the video, comment down below, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Bye, guys.